We're just being a little silly today. Welcome to the Information Governance Community Roundtable. I'm one of your hosts, Donda Young of Helios Consulting. And with me today, I have Mr. Weissman. Introduce yourself, please.
Steve Weissman, founder and CEO of Holly Group.
And Mr. Wilkins.
I'm Jesse Wilkins, and I'm a senior advisor at Opensity Solutions.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So today it's really about you guys asking your questions of us. This is an Ask Me Anything. Now, I will preface that with let's try and keep it to the information governance, compliance, data governance space. What hot sauces Mr. Wilkins likes probably isn't necessarily in the bounds of our conversation today, though I'm sure he will answer those questions later.
Although we might be curious to know the provenance of the nutritional information on the labels thereof.
Well, yes, that could be helpful.
I would argue,
not
in
as
fairness,
metadata.
that Alan Pell Sharp is big on the use of blockchain for smart contracts and supply chain enforcement of said peppers and other ingredients. While I haven't used the substrate of hot sauces, I have used the substrate of chocolate to do taxonomy exercises.
This is
So it's just about getting creative.
true.
And as I have long said, everything is information.
It is. Just depends on how you want to look at it, right? So, we have a small crowd at the moment, and I'm sure folks will join us shortly, but this really is about you guys asking questions of us, questions that keep you up at night, or it could simply be a conversation about a topic that you've been either curious about or you're stepping your toes in and want to get a collective thought process on that particular topic. So feel free to interject yourselves and ask away.
And just so you know, as is the tradition with such online things, we have collected some topics from the world that we can go to, if and as there's time. But knowing this group, we'll run out of time. We'll run out of time pretty quickly, which somehow doesn't make sense, but does.
I will say lately I've been using testing Microsoft Copilot Cowork, which is still in frontier mode. So I don't know if anyone else has access to that. So today I asked it to do a kind of a PII search over all the SharePoint sites and OneDrives and everything that I have access to. And it provided like a 5-page, very structured report, specific file paths, locations, not necessarily like crazy sensitive data, but things that I might want to consider. So that's the first time that I've really used that to uncover some things that are kind of living in my world. Again, only 2 resources that I have permissions for. So it's kind of interesting.
Nice.
And how did it go? I mean, did you see obvious holes, or was it surprisingly complete, or?
It was very thorough. I just don't have anything that would
Okay.
that, or yeah, so I didn't have any hidden skeletons or anything. No credit card information, but I think it would have found it.
I find that fascinating because I went to the ILTA Evolve conference a couple of weeks ago, and almost every session they mentioned this, but one of them, the guy really drove this home. He said, here's a great way to kill your career. And of course, all of our ears perked up because who doesn't want their career killed? He said, go to your organization and do a search for how much your boss makes, or the CEO of a non-publicly traded company, or some other type of super, super sensitive information using AI. And whatever you find, you should probably take to your cybersecurity people immediately so they know you're not trying to hack their systems. But the point was that, best laid plans of mice and men, right? Everybody thinks they've got good security, it's implemented correctly, people are trained on it. And then you've got some random knucklehead like me who wants to share a file with my dear colleague John. And so I copy it into OneDrive. And if you don't have the DLP in place to prevent that, Well, now you've got all these little one-offs in OneDrives and C drives and personally, wherever you sent it, that now the AI has access to. And this conference being able to, it was in the context of law firms, but it was, they said, this isn't just a law firm problem. This is an every enterprise problem because every enterprise's SharePoint looks exactly like their file shares did or do
Yep.
and has
For
just as
sure.
good security. So the
Just
fact
that.
that you didn't find anything is actually either reassuring or you need to revisit your prompt.
Well, I think, John, you said it's because there was nothing to find the way you tested this, which is another point. If it ain't there, it can't be found.
Yeah, some guy once said trust but verify, and so I'd be engaging with my IT team to do the functional equivalent of penetration testing against the AI and just let them loose and pay them $50 for every confidential document they find or make up.
Well, it's funny. I don't know, funny. The timing is good. It certainly speaks to the timeliness of the issue. This morning I was on a call. Somebody had discovered Google's Notebook LM. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
Love
It's
it.
it's very, very cool. The fellow was demonstrating it in the context of his own marketing of his own company, and he wanted to sort of pull in from everywhere. What are people saying about me? And it drew a fancy chart, and it made up a podcast. But it also terrified me because it doesn't do anything to verify any of the information. And well, and he pointed out, well, it says that they're not using it to train their AI engine, blah blah blah. And little old me thought out loud, I don't believe it for a second. So I went myself to, because like everybody else, I go onto things and I sign up and I'm playing with it. I know I'm not putting anything in, but I didn't actually read the little pop-up that says where they're sending. It was very specific. It said, we are not training our Notebook LM engine on this. And my brain immediately went to, okay, but where else then? And your reaction, right? That's what everybody else on the call basically said. Never thought about that. So your experience, it seems pretty isolated. Actually, you've taken the lid off an ungainly, I'm gonna murder the metaphors, can of worms, because you're immediately into security and verifications of the, and provenance of the data and service level agreements and how they're written and what do they say. And not to minimize the work, but basically what I heard you say is this is a new thing from Microsoft and we tested it out and it seemed pretty cool. So,
It's turtles all the way down.
yeah. I don't know if the chat just pops up in the video or not, but it says my autobiography should be murdering the metaphors. 4. Okay. Oh, you were counting. Thanks, Ange. Couldn't have done it without you, but would have rather have. Oh, what else we got? You're a deep thinker, Angela. Tell us what's on your mind.
Well, I haven't had a lot of coffee, and thank you for that. Well, up in Alberta, in the Canada, right now, a lot of municipal governments are quickly trying to implement privacy management programs because they just changed the legislation. Well, they changed the legislation last year, but we've all had a year to create a whole privacy management program, including personal information banks. And the legislation, one of the biggest changes was the inclusion of data matching in how you work with the information. So they're considering that personally identifiable information that needs to be protected. So that's kind of one of the things that I'm challenged with right now. So updating the governance to support the legislation, documenting stuff that wasn't documented before and looking at it. And I'm in a new role, so I'm learning the organization as well. So, so that's kind of the biggest thing that's happening with us. Less AI because we're not there yet, but it's coming for sure. So, to the good, I'm creating everything from the baseline the right way.
So you
So,
probably already know this, but for anybody who catches this recording later,
mhm.
IPP actually has a certification and a body of knowledge and study materials for Canadian privacy. So I would
CIAPP.
IAPP.
Mhm.
It's I don't know that you would want the certification because the one that's Canada specific is also very Canada legislation specific, though maybe you do want that. Most of the people who get the those specific ones are lawyers
Mhm.
because it's a lot of minutiae about which agency controls this and what act controls that. But it's really good stuff, and they have study materials that might be worth your time just to get as a kind of a reference.
Yeah, it's a great suggestion. I know that the University of Alberta has courses on
Hmm.
this to get that as well. So, yeah, that's a great suggestion. I'll take a look. So, yeah, that's good. I'll actually put a link to the new legislation in it because it separates privacy protection and access to information into two separate pieces of legislation.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, Ange, the other one from IAPP is the CIPM, which is a Certified Information Privacy Manager.
Mhm.
And I'm actually studying for that one now because I'm finding that there are some of my clients that really don't have a privacy program. And so I'd like to be able to support that effort. And it sounds like maybe what you're trying to build is from that ground up managing the privacy piece. So that may be another resource at IAPP.
Yeah, I'll totally check those out. What's interesting to me is that across all of the different jurisdictions and levels of government, that we're all trying to protect personally identifiable information and allow access to it. But there's so many different kinds of legislation from so many different places.
Yeah.
Stateside, it can vary even more so than Canada, right?
There are currently 21 different states that have their own quote unquote comprehensive privacy legislation. California and Colorado were two of the early ones. California has already gone back and updated theirs more than once. But you also get into weird things where you've got what most of us would think of as privacy, and then you've got child privacy, and you've got biometric and medical information privacy. And so it's all these nuances of stuff. I tell any records manager I meet, if you want to have guaranteed employability for the rest of your life, go into privacy because it's never a dull moment.
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned health, and Alberta has our own Health Information Act as well, which takes paramountcy over the Protection of Privacy Act and ATIA.
Doesn't really surprise me. One would hope that the architects of all these things would get together and kind of sort it out, and one would hope for a long, long time for that to happen.
You would think, but each ministry is its own public body, so.
Yep.
Well, at
Yeah.
least there's that little bit of clarity, which one supersedes which ones.
Mm.
I always liken it to the environmental protection rules for like vehicle emissions here. California's were always the most stringent, so the manufacturers would build the car to that standard,
Right.
which was sort of overkill for the rest of the country. This doesn't really work that way, which is to the great frustration. Like Donda, a lot of my clients obviously they're circling the privacy drain. There's another metaphor for you, which I only mean half tongue in cheek, because they don't know which way to turn. We operate in multiple states, which I'm in compliance with in this state, but not in that state. What do I do?
Well, and I think we've been doing some of that, right? I mean, retention rules are different across
Mhm.
different states
For
and
sure.
jurisdictions. I will say, Angela, that Canada seems to be towards the forefront, if not at the bleeding edge of the coal seam, if I can mangle my meta fives. Um, in the sense that what's her name? Anne Kavukian, I think her name is. She was the privacy commissioner for the Privacy Commission of Ontario.
Mhm.
And she wrote a number of years ago something called Privacy by Design
Mhm.
that has been expanded just tons and tons and tons over the years. But it's really kind of an interesting approach um, that organizations can do, but especially that we're hoping that software and process companies can do in terms of thinking about it at the design stage rather than trying to bolt it on at the end. And so
Yep,
you're going to
that's
do a
the
new
one,
website
John.
and it's going to let you look up traffic tickets. This was a thing I actually ran into for a number of years when I worked at the city and county of Denver. We wanted to build a website, look up your traffic tickets. How do you prove that you have access to this? Well, you don't have to because under the Public Records Acts, indeed, under the Public Records Acts, driving stuff is public record. The problem is that at the time, there were no limits on what you could look up. All you needed was a license plate. Well, I can find a license plate. And at the time, our traffic tickets included your home address as a publicly available field, your phone number, if you had given it, and your social security number.
Oof.
And so anybody could come in and do a public records request for any ticket issued to any vehicle in the state of Colorado and get all that information.
Just
You
for the
think people
speaker
weren't
list.
looking
For
up Patrick
real?
Waugh and John
Wow.
Elway and we actually had a horrific crime happen. One of the actresses from Mork and Mindy was murdered after the guy stalked her using publicly available records
Wow.
from the DMV. And so that's why they changed that law. So a lot of that stuff it's all still public record, but a lot of that is limited, right? You can't just get my home address from the ticket I got 2 years ago. It shows you that I got the ticket and the license plate and the VIN number, but I think that's it. The rest of the information is suppressed.
Wow. See, that is not in Alberta. Like, for all public bodies and the Alberta registries, which is the same as DMV, they're a government body and they have to protect that. It's not available at all.
Well, we do
Only
now.
time
What happened to the old paper tickets?
they're still used.
At least for us, they moved to the kind of you guys will appreciate this. They kind of moved to the thermal paper ones.
Mhm.
So they just scan your VIN, scan your license plate, all the information pops into the thing in their little UPS tablet. They print it and they give it to you and it gets uploaded to the database in theory that same day. But when I got my ticket a couple of years ago, it was like 3 weeks into the 4 week you have to pay before it doubles period before I was able to pay it online. And I could see all the information, but if I just randomly did a search for, say, my wife's car, um, even though we're in the same household, the system doesn't know that. And so it just shows license plate, VIN number, first name, last name, and then the salient facts around the infraction.
And I just want to congratulate you. We should all celebrate Jesse and his willingness to do this kind of primary research for the good of the profession to go out and get himself a traffic ticket.
Yes.
Indeed.
You're a hero, Jesse. You're a hero.
I'm a legend in my own mind.
And then
I
the
was
thermal
thinking the
pit that you're
horses-
left with is good because you leave it on your dashboard and it unfades it.
Mhm.
Yeah, within about 6 hours.
Mhm.
I was thinking the horses in Alberta only go so fast. You probably won't get any tickets.
Hey, John.
Terrible. Although I ran into a story the other day about somebody who had gotten caught for, they called it galloping while intoxicated because apparently the guy was on his horse headed home from the bar and was so drunk that the horse was like wandering either into traffic or onto the sidewalk, wherever it was not supposed to be, that's where it was. And the guy was basically passed out in the saddle.
Oh, wow.
But it was the horse that was galloping, not him.
Well, and in fairness, it wasn't galloping actually, it was walking, but they wanted the gooey rather than the wooey. So I don't know.
See, folks,
I don't even
governance
know
can be
what you just
fun.
said.
Should I take a topic off the list?
Yeah.
People mailed in.
Sure.
Here's one of Donda's favorites. The information management team can't do it all, so you have to have help. So it's all pitched at. You got any war stories about communities of practice?
Oh, yeah, not having them. That's the
Not having them. That's what.
That's the horror.
honestly. I mean, everyone who's in the governance, and I use that as a broader term, space, knows that their mighty but small teams can't do it all, right? You have to have help. And though I have only worked with a few public sector groups, that in and of itself is
Bye,
a
John.
challenge,
Thanks for coming.
right? Bye, John. Because different agencies do different things, and sometimes they really don't want to work together well when it comes to managing information. But then when you flip over to the private sector, it's kind of the same thing, quite honestly. And what I have found from a success story is building those communities of practice to support compliance, governance, risk controls, audit controls, privacy makes an absolutely huge difference in the ability to, I use ensure as loosely because you can't always be 100%, right? But to help ensure that you're following along with your own policies, rules and regs, best practices. But what I have found through building those communities of practice is that it starts changing the culture internally. It changes a culture that people want to do the right thing. They just need to be told what and how. It's the how that these communities of practice, it's almost like setting up mini IG groups or people within the business, kind of helping them become a pseudo records analyst, if you will, in some cases, or a privacy analyst, depending on the lens that the organization is looking for. And sometimes they have kind of all three: privacy liaisons, records or information coordinators or liaisons, and then you have data stewards. And what I've seen a lot of times, the data stewards, at least in a couple organizations that I've worked with, they've been the info coordinator, the privacy coordinator, and the data steward. That's all three add-on roles to the role that they was hired for. And I'm a huge advocate of pushing the envelope with HR to say, look, these are the add-on, ad hoc responsibilities that are being placed within the business. Let's actually make that an actual role for the business that has to be filled by the business to support the broader compliance, governance, risk, cyber aspects within an organization. Now, have I been able to change that yet? No. But that is, if you want to be successful in managing information, a governance, compliance, risk, cyber team, they cannot do it on their own. It takes a community of individuals, and it takes the culture of the organization to change and to educate properly so that folks will understand their responsibilities, but then also embrace the responsibility of wanting to do the right thing. So that's my spiel. I'm sticking to it.
Well, it's, once again, it happens every roundtable. We're back to culture change, communication. I have a question just to follow up on that. do you have a sense of where would be the best place, suspecting that there isn't, that this consolidated role lives in an organization? Because I hear it and see it both ways, where it's embedded in a group, could be IT, could be records, could be legal, and therefore everybody hates it because, well, we're not even represented because it's all going to be about, or the group doesn't understand why it's even there because they don't know enough. Or it's pulled out as an independent body and everybody hates it because you're not in my department. I don't have to listen to you. It's like, well, we can't have it both ways.
Yeah, I don't know that if you were to take a data steward, we'll use that particular role, and say, okay, all data stewards now report to the IT risk group, but they sit in the business. I think what has to happen that would work best is a dotted line responsibility. They work for the business, but they have a dotted line responsibility to that other group. So IT risk, or maybe it's internal audit, or maybe it's privacy, or maybe it's data governance, lower IG governance, depending on what you have in your organization. Because I think that connectivity and continuity has to be there. They have to know the business because they have to know the information that is produced, created, stored, etc. within the business, but they have that dotted line responsibility to whatever group that is, privacy, whomever, to track, support, educate the employees within the business to get the end results that are needed coming from the various compliance realms that an organization or even a public entity has to support. At least that's how I've seen it work best, because you have to have the knowledge within the business to understand what they're doing, to be able to articulate back to those other groups the whys and hows, to be able to make it work effectively. At least that's how I've seen it, and seen it work well in that light.
So Angela posted in the chat, it's a bit of a federated approach, and isn't that part of the reason why we have coordinators, stewards, liaisons, whatever you choose to call them, and really to have them embedded in those business units, so that on the one hand, it's neither of the two issues, Steve, that you raised in terms of they're not of us or they have no power over us. They're of it as well as in it.
Mhm.
Right? So this particular steward or coordinator is a sales rep, and they're going to hate you for that because reasons, but and this one does work for the general counsel, and this one is an engineer. So they're going to have an easier time, I would argue, figuring out where the bodies are buried, right?
Mhm.
All of the slightly illicit to incredibly illicit practices that go on in every department, they're going to know about them and maybe even raise them to the core governance function in a way that, well, okay, this is the need that we have, and we know we're not supposed to be using Box or Dropbox or, insert whatever horrible outside the box tool here, but we have this business need. So how do we do it if we can't do it that way? And then you can have that discussion. But I think the risk of just simply having them bungee in or be tied to that specific leadership group, I think that kind of detracts from their the value that they provide. So I agree. It's that dotted line, I think, is what you have to do. And in my happy, joy-filled, wish-filled world where resources are never an object and everybody does what I want before I ask, I would actually have the all four tiers of what I used to teach as the information governance framework, which is the steering committee of the decision makers, a center of excellence to really build out those defensible best practices and no, you shouldn't be using Box for that. We can do that with SharePoint. And then your community of practice and your minions. Minions by whatever name you choose to call them.
This is very helpful conversation because I have to develop this here because it's just a way to understand everybody and to create that baseline. This is our level of understanding of how to manage information as an entire organization together. So
Ooh,
I'm
we
gonna
know
take
somebody who
some
can
of
help
this.
with that.
Oh, do you?
Let me know, Ange.
Yeah. Don, I just want to like go back to one of the things you said
Sure.
that I think it's really important. That's having that line in somebody's position potentially that identifies that this records management is part of your role. And that's one thing that I did in another organization is because records management was just one line in everybody's, but for the data stewards and the people that would be in that community of practice meeting, I made sure that this is what it actually means. So it helped highlight to the senior leadership that this is what the role actually involves. It's not just like putting a label on a folder.
No, I completely agree, Ange. You have to do what I did for one of my clients is I built a RACI matrix, and we also built, okay, what is this role really going to look like? And I threw out a draft at my client, and of course I used pie in the sky, because I wanted them to think about what that really means for them, given they knew their culture better than I did, right? Some of the things got redlined, fine, not my organization. I'm here to support and help. But there were some things that they didn't consider as part of the role. And, as a good consultant, I've kept that information as we've built that out, because for me, it can be a template, a foundation for my other clients to be able to work through those things. You absolutely have to flesh out. It's not just a line item. That's what this line item means, and here are the responsibilities of what that line item means. Sure, you can have the line item, but when the person gets assigned, you have to have those responsibilities spelled out. And I would even go as far as to say, create an operating procedure for records management for each unit. We've done that as well. And that turned out to be a template that could be almost rinsed and repeated per unit, but they were absolutely told, please, if you work a little different than what this template has outlined, please let us know that so that it's more catered to how you work. That piece right there was very instrumental. They didn't feel forced, that they were pigeonholed into a best practice that, the governance or records management team has stated, this is law, this is how you do it. But they also were able to have the autonomy to change it slightly based off of how they work. And it seemed to be adopted very well.
I'm going to throw this out here real quick because I saw your post, Angela. I know you're about to leave us. This book, which I don't get. No, I know. I don't get any money from. I don't get any. I read it and read it and read it and read it. I'm trying to turn my background off so you can see it, and it's not playing nice. So I'm just going to tell you, it's called Non-Invasive Data Governance. The author is Robert S. Seiner, Seiner. He's done 2 or 3 books in this series, but this is the first one. It's very short, 125 pages, and he talks about doing governance in a way that people don't think they're doing governance.
It's a great
the
book.
stuff they're already. Oh, you've got it. Okay.
Yeah, I've got it. I've read it. I've got it in print and audio.
Oh, well, there you go.
But it's great for the people that are viewing after, because it's such an amazing book.
I'm waiting for the movie.
I think Robert Redford is going to be playing Bob Seiner, so it should be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks for
Good
coming.
seeing you, Angela.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
Ange. Good to see you.
You too.
I've got one follow-up to that last little bit of discussion, because very often I would even go as far as to say in that line item, take the word record off,
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
because it's, certainly it's all the records disciplines, and they already do those things on the data side of the house. But because we don't, I'm not a records manager, business records are a pain. What's a business record? I had a client whose IT people told me, we don't have any records.
I've heard that a
Flat,
lot from
period.
IT.
It's like,
Um,
pardon me?
Uh-huh.
so let me meet you halfway, because I know that we have talked and you have talked about the importance of managing your stuff. So while I'm not quite ready to say stuff manager or stuff coordinator, I think whatever the preferred term is in the organization, if it's all data, then it's a data
Mhm.
coordinator or data steward. If it's
Right.
information, at the big retail client that I worked with a couple of years ago, their program was called Information Lifecycle Management. They were allergic to the term information governance. I don't really know why. I don't think we ever figured it out. But okay, fine. ILM coordinator or
Mhm.
steward or advisor, or, whatever. I think they actually called them advisors because that sounded a little more high class than coordinator.
Yep.
Words don't matter until they do. And in this case, I think it was much more important that they establish the role, the additional duty as assigned, and train people on it and get them in that mindset than what it was called. But it
Mhm.
did use their terminology, so I think that helped.
Oh, absolutely. Call it whatever. That's how I started using the word stuff. It just saves so much time not to have to argue about vocabulary. It's the
Yeah.
doing that's
Yes,
important. So
it
that's,
is.
it like so many of these things, it immediately brings us into the realm of communication. You guys know, and looking into the camera, you guys, I'm sure, have heard me say this a million times too, that so much of this is marketing.
Yeah.
You're not selling a product to a consumer, except that you are.
Well,
And
and
the more
go
you
ahead.
can speak in terms, the everybody always says, well, you should talk to people the way you want to be spoken to.
Mhm.
When in truth, you should speak to people in the way they want to be spoken to.
Yes.
Channeling my business coach here, but I also learned that a long time ago. You won't be heard if you're going to make them think about, what does he mean by that? Or, well, we don't call
Mhm.
it that. Clearly, he doesn't understand what I'm going through.
Yeah.
It's Mad Libs. Just fill in the, you know,
Well, and I think we as consultants maybe get that a little more than people who are doing this internally with their organization. But I think you're right, and it's even more important for them in some ways because I'm a chameleon. I'll pick up whatever you want me to call it. But that thing you just said, you need to talk to them in the language that they understand. I think that's an incredibly powerful takeaway for people who watch this video. You know, maybe it's not walking a mile in their shoes because then you're a mile away and you have their shoes, but it is at least recognizing that if you get onto this long, insane discussion about the nuances of metadata and taxonomies and ontologies, at best you're going to get a blank stare.
For sure.
And so I think part of it is talking to them in a way that they will understand, and part of it is also talking in a way that they will care about. And again, I think that's why these coordinator type roles and communities of practice are so important, because we can come to that maybe not quite consensus, but at least a shared mental model, a shared understanding that we're talking about the same thing. Call it what you want.
Mhm.
That doesn't matter. What matters is you're going to do the thing that you need to do to help your own job, not just, this nebulous keep the CEO out of jail bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that terminology piece is certainly a key when it comes to building these communities of practice, because they will tell you, well, we don't call it that. Okay, great. Then build your thesaurus from there. And that's just going to help a lot more people than just who's in that particular business unit. So, we'll move on from that topic, but just I will state that in September, we will be talking about communities of practice more. So feel free to watch our LinkedIn page for upcoming announcements on that front. I think we had one more topic that we teed up, Steve, in our lovely list.
Yeah,
It
no, we
was
did.
mobility and
Yeah,
migration of
yep.
offices changing, systems changing, mergers and acquisitions, I think was another big one that we had said was a hot topic for folks.
Yeah, and I think it was in the context of business is dynamic. People like the list you just said, people move. Certainly data moves. So as an issue, how do we think about it? One of my favorite examples in this regard is a big pharmaceutical company that had clinical test trial data literally dating back to the 1950s. Well, of course, all that's on paper. And they grew increasingly digital over the decades. And because, storage is free, they never got rid of anything, including the paper. And then they got a mandate, we're moving to the cloud. And you could hear the blood drain out of the IT manager's face because he ain't moving all that stuff. So they got to pay for all of it to be housed somewhere,
Mhm.
Right.
So he was in a bit of a panic. Not a new issue, but I thought it was an interesting example, and then it cuts in a lot of different directions. So one of our recent roundtables, Jesse, you were talking about, we were talking about it under the context of cost cutting. So the law firms with their pricey real estate in the center of a city, and they're running out of room, but half the third floor is nothing but file boxes.
Right.
And you want to move those so you can put people in. It's cheaper than buying another floor of the building.
Right.
But how do you go about moving it?
Yeah, and I mean that's certainly something not limited to law firms, though they seem to be some of the more egregious offenders, as it were. But any organization that's got a lot of paper, right? There's really kind of two things, and one is kind of necessarily leading to the other these days. Um, the first step is, well, we've got too much paper on site that we can't get rid of, right? Obviously,
Right.
clean your house. But the stuff you have to keep, or you're not sure if you have to keep, that human clinical trial data probably needs to be kept for a really long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So you can move it to offsite storage, and that's going to be way cheaper than, downtown class one Manhattan or Chicago or Denver office space. Then the next question is, well, okay, if we have to touch it anyway, why not just scan the stuff that we need to keep? And what's that look like? And that's a whole separate project. And I think at some point, and we have talked about this in the past, at some point we'll probably want to revisit, because all too many people think that scanning is just throw a piece of paper in the direction of a scanner, hit the button, and off you go. And I have one law firm I'm working with that's got 1.5 million boxes in offsite storage. If each box only has 1,000 pages, that's do the math. Let me pull my shoes off. That's 1.5 billion pages to scan. You might get that done before the sun goes cold,
Mm-hmm.
but you might not. And so I think a lot of this becomes an exercise in thinking, one, how do we think agile and think about ways to do things that are either faster or make more sense or support the business better, i.e., not scanning things that don't need to be scanned. And another of it is the actual planning. And I think too often organizations don't really have that capacity in-house, which is why they call people like us, because we have done that with pharma and with law firms and with whomever. And we can kind of, to the point both of you made earlier, we can kind of see the things that they may not know to think about.
Yeah, for sure. It really does boil down to, I've been part of a few mergers and acquisitions and product selling off products in the insurance space. And it really boiled down to when it came to, okay, this is what's left over. What are we going to do with it? It came down to what's it as simple as what's its retrieval rate? Is it high? Then we might want to scan it now. But if not, then it sits in a box. And when it is requested, we'll make a decision at that point if we're going to scan it, scan on demand. And that seemed to work pretty well for the majority of the information that was, left behind and had to stay relevant.
Not coincidentally, perhaps, I don't know which is the cause and which is the effect, but a lot of these topics we've covered in previous roundtables in different levels of detail. So if you're new to us or you've just forgotten, I invite you to take a look back through some of the prior recordings. I guess you can't have a future recording. But a lot of these, we talk through to fair level of detail rather than just platitudes about. Then, of course, if you've got questions or suggestions, other best practices, I always say we're the most reachable people in the world between our email addresses, which will be in the program notes. You can find us on LinkedIn, anywhere the words information and records and governance show up in proximity. We're probably there, one of us.
Yeah, we're all associated with our associations too. So AIM, ARMA, Jesse with ILTA, and some of us with IAPP from a privacy perspective. And then there's DAMA, which is DAMA, which is the Data Management Association as well. So we can be found. And please find us. We encourage conversations and we encourage the connection with everyone. So I say with parting words, Jesse, can you kind of give us a little bit of your parting thoughts for today?
Yeah, I just want to echo what you just said, that we try and set these up as conversations. We as I think, Steve, you've borrowed from that commercial a couple of times. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two, and that's kind of the value of talking to us and coming to a meeting like this. But the other thing is that everybody else on these meetings often has seen a thing or two as well and has lessons learned and horror stories to share. So I highly encourage anybody watching this video, come to one of the live sessions. I promise you it will not be a waste of an hour of your life.
No, that's true. And I'll close by saying I'm grateful when you do, because it cuts both ways and I learn things.
Absolutely.
I certainly make a point beyond just working with clients to keep myself in the mainstream so I can pick up on latest trends and issues and successes and unsuccesses. But hearing what's on your mind certainly helps me in my work, which then helps me help you, Jerry Maguire. But it also gives us more fodder for these roundtables as we continue to do them. So we can all help each other, I think. And, God forbid we should all happen to see each other at some event in person sometime.
Right.
That's even better.
Yes, it is even better. And I would say my parting words is we are here each month for all of you. Knowing that we are, I hope you engage, whether that's through our Information Governance Community Roundtable page on LinkedIn. And we also have a YouTube channel, so you can watch our prior videos. So please tune in. Please tap in to all of us if you have questions. We're happy to support you. And I hope that the rest of your summer and we see you is lovely, and we see you again on our next roundtable in June, which our topic is, gents. What did we decide today on that topic, by the way? Just to give a little bit of a teaser.
If I recall correctly, because I've ran out of my oily coffee bean chocolate drink,
Oh, he did it. He did it, Steve.
We had a
If I
challenge
recall
that evening.
correctly, we're talking about public speaking and finding speakers and being speakers, and I think we're still trying to let the jello set a bit, but it's going to be something around speaking and presenting. So I hope you'll join us in June.
Yeah, particularly in the context of your internal communication, how
Right.
to be a governance marketeer inside.
Yeah.
And so much of that is speaking people's languages. So yeah, we haven't put a pithy title on it, but that's the gist, as they say.
That is
Fourth
the
week of the month, fourth Wednesday.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you, gents, once again for joining me and IU. It is always a pleasure to see your lovely faces and have conversations. And thanks to our small but mighty audience today with very good questions. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
See you on
Thanks,
the internet.
everybody.